When you take one of the most influential anti-imperialist stories ever written, and you pull it out of the Congo, and you replace the time period, and drop it into the trauma of the Vietnam War, what happens? What you get is a masterpiece. Both Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness and Francis Ford Coppola's Apocalypse Now follows a similar premise. A man travels deeper into hostile territory to find another man who's gone too far. But Apocalypse Now is not about adapting Conrad's story. It's translating the novel and its ideas about imperialism and moral collapse into a cinematic experience that's driven by sound, image, and psychological intensity. Where the novel asks readers to interpret darkness through language, the film focuses viewers to experience it directly. This shift in medium changes not only how the story is told, but how its themes affect the audience. In both works, the river journey is more than just physical travel. It's functioning as a symbol. It's showing that as they go up the river, they travel into their minds more, into disorder, uncertainty, and the darkest place of human nature. In Heart of Darkness, Marlowe's movements upriver unveil this internal unraveling. As he travels further and further away from his European society, the values that supposedly define civilization to him begin to collapse. Conrad turns the landscape into psychological symbolism. The lines suggest that darkness is not just a place, but is a condition of the human mind. The journey inward unveils a journey downward into one's soul. Compare this to Apocalypse Now, where Captain Willard follows the same narrative structure, but the film allows the descent to become sensory for the audience. As we travel upriver, lighting gets harsher, the environments become more surreal, and each stop on the riverbank feels more irrational than the last. Instead of imagining the confusion through the narration and just hearing our characters' internal thoughts, the viewer now feels trapped in that river, and everything seems to unravel faster. The film is able to externalize that chaos. However, the novel has to keep it internal and through its characterization. Both of these works expose imperial power as a violence disguised as order, progress, or duty. In Conrad's novel, European colonization in Africa is presented as exploitative and hypocritical. The language of civilization hides both its greed and cruelty. This line strips away imperial propaganda and reveals conquest for what it really is, a domination over people. Another moment deepens this critique. Here, power is shown as unstable and dependent on exploitation rather than a true moral superiority. Let's compare this again to Apocalypse Now, where the same criticism of the novel on imperial conquest becomes explicit through the visuals. Helicopter Assault is thrilling, chaotic, and horrifying all at once. We can see the intention in the filmmaker's decision. The scene turns war into a spectacle. We see how absurd and destructive the US presence was in Vietnam. And with the music, the wide shots, and the explosive sound design, the film shows how violence can be normalized when wrapped up in extreme patriotism and performance.
Horror has a face, and you must make a friend of horror. Horror and moral terror are your friends. If they are not, then they are enemies to be feared.
Kurtz is the central symbol in both works. He represents what happens when authority is cut loose from morality. In Heart of Darkness, Kurt is portrayed as distant and almost mythical. He is built through rumor and reputation before he ever appears. This makes him feel larger than life, less of a man and more of a boogeyman. In Apocalypse Now, Kurtz becomes fully embodied through Marlon Brando's excellent performance. The lighting, shown in Kurtz's scenes hides parts of his face, visually suggesting a fractured identity and that he's almost concealing his true morals. Marlon Brando's performance is excellent. His voice and calm presence seems entirely unsettling compared to the chaotic events that happen around him. When he says, the horror, the film directly connects itself to Conrad's text. In the novel, the phrase feels like a final recognition of what he has become. Compare this to the film, where it feels like a judgment on the entire Vietnam War itself. In this way, Kurtz is not just a character. He is a symbol of the entire unchecked power of the United States presence in the Vietnam War. So while both texts can tell a very similar story, their medium and how they do it and the tools that they use feels very different. The novel can rely on symbolism, its narration, its ambiguity, and internal reflection, while the film relies on lighting and shadows, sound design, editing, shot choices, music, and visual surrealism. When someone reads the novel, the language and the writing stays in your head and it's private, while on a film, the viewer experiences image and sound in real time. That's why Apocalypse Now feels more intimate. It does not simply describe corruption, it full-on immerses the audience in the horror of the Vietnam War. And it mattered historically. Heart of Darkness was published while imperial exploitation in the Congo was still very active, and Apocalypse Now only arrived a few years after the Vietnam War, and the conflict was still fresh in the public memory. Both works are here to confront their audiences with violence that many people are trying to understand or choosing to ignore. Apocalypse Now succeeds because it doesn't copy Heart of Darkness. It reinvents it. By moving Conrad's story from the Congo to Vietnam and shifting the time period, the film proves that the darkness at the center of both works is not tied to one place or one era. It emerges whenever power operates without a concisus. The novel makes readers think, while the film makes viewers feel. And together, they leave each with a question. How far up the river can we go? How far into darkness can humanity go before there is nothing left to return?